Okay, hello there, Lucy.
Hello.
So nice of you to join me. It's really exciting to have you just on this call at the moment, and it's one of those weird things of the situation at the minute where we kind of, if you don't mind me saying for the viewers, we actually had a look at sort of thinking what should your background be, and then realised actually it's kind of great to see where the magic happens and
Or my
like
lab.
the madness behind you.
What do you
So
mean
I guess,
madness?
oh, sorry, extremely organized.
Madness.
Yeah, exactly. Organized chaos as, like my whiteboard. But anyway, for anyone who doesn't know, we're going to get into your title, but I'm sure a lot of people will have probably clicked on the link because of your time with Robot Wars, but we're going to go past that. And indeed, I think it was kind of crazy because the first time we ended up almost sort of meeting over the internet, as it were, was around you doing some amazing gold flashing LED boots. So I kind of feel that, one of the reasons I really wanted to catch up with you on this was because you've always described yourself recently as an inventor with a sense of fun. And I kind of feel that's a great place to start because, as we all know, it's all too easy to take ourselves so seriously in this world. And so I'd love it if you could just take us through how you got into having such a fun career in making.
When I was at school, we had a club that was based on the Great Egg Race. So 1970s BBC programme
Heinz Wolf.
of Heinz Wolf.
I met him.
And I used to come in, I used to waltz into that club and do really, really well. And I was like, I told my teacher, I want to do this for a living. How do I do this for a living? He said, become an engineer.
Yeah.
So off I went to university and was disappointed because that's not what I learnt at university. And then started with, I was on a graduate training scheme. And again, it wasn't the Great Egg Race. And ended up doing a PhD in industry, which was playing with bubbles, but manufacturing, using a high-speed video camera to see how bubbles are made. And so I was sort of I was in the making scene there because I had to make my own test equipment. Then I left industry, got really disheartened with the whole engineering industry and sexism, and set up a computer consultancy it was over the Y2K, so a lot of work available then. Did that for a while, and then when I came out of that, I thought, I don't know that much about current engineering. I'd been out of the industry for 10 years. And I went to a course called Singularity University. It was based at NASA Ames. It was started by Peter Diamandis of X Prize and Ray Kurzweil, who Kurzweil keyboards. He invented optical character recognition, many things. And the whole course took us there were 85 of us from around the world. And it took us from, here are all the exponential technologies. So I'd gone from 10 years behind engineering to maybe 10 years, 20 years ahead of what is going to be. And this was back in 2011, and the Google car had just come out, the self-driving car. And so we got to see that. We were talking about genomics and sequencing DNA, and it was absolutely amazing bringing in all the experts from around the world to talk to us about what the exponential technologies are, what are the technologies that are going to take off, and then giving us the world's problems as well, and saying, put the two together, off you go. And so that's when I started working in space debris. But it felt to me that whole course smashed my eyes and then put them together like a fly's. So they're multifaceted. And I could see something off in my left periphery and my right periphery, grab them, bring them together, combine them into something that the left and the right wouldn't have seen before. And so that was when I started thinking, okay, I can look at things differently. And it's also about the time when the Raspberry Pi came out, Raspberry Pi computer. And I just started playing with it because I thought, okay, I need to know these things. I want to learn. And I started blogging and I started doing various communication things. So it all sort of happened all together, that I could realise that I could see things differently than some other people, and that was something that could be of benefit. And therefore trying to work out how, 20 years after I did my degree, how I could do great egg race type stuff actually for a living, even though, it's not a career and I haven't got one employer. I have many, many employers and I do many, many different things, but they all have that sense of fun and also making manufacturing somehow through them.
And I mean, do you mind me asking, roughly how old were you when you started getting into Raspberry Pi?
Just 10 years ago, so 35-ish.
Right. Because I mean, you could almost say that's sort of not traditionally the sort of time when people pick up coding.
Well, I was meant to learn coding at university. So I went to university to do mechatronics, mechanical and electronics, and absolutely hated the electronics and the computing. I was learning Ada for beginners. I don't think Java had been invented then. The internet was just a thing. I sent one email to my brother at York University. I was at Lancaster, and that was the whole of it for 3 years. That was the email that we sent. It was like, what's the point of this? Why are we doing it? There was no internet. There was no web. Sorry. And so, the Ada for beginner, Ada for engineers was just, I didn't understand it. The electronics was harder than I could get my head round. And so I stuck with manufacturing and mechanical. So I'd done it, but been put off, but I still had that logical, inquiring mind. And I had lived on the Isle of Wight for a while, and one of my near neighbours happened to be Andy Stanford Clark, who's the Chief Technology Officer of IBM UK and Ireland now. And we'd met over Twitter, actually, and he introduced me to Node-RED, which is a visual programming like the Lego Mindstorms block programming. And so with that, I could then program. And that's what got me into it. And the first thing I made was with his virtual support, as I sent over DMs on Twitter. Andy, how do I? And he helped me make a. It sent me a tweet when the International Space Station was going to go overhead.
Wow.
So there was at the time there was a Twitter feed that would take your postcode and send you a message 10 minutes before. And I wanted to get that message and send it to me as a text or an email, or send it to me 2 minutes before, or something different. And then I said, I want to do this with a light, though. I want a light to shine up. I don't want to have to look at the Twitter. I want a light to shine. And so he said, oh, that's what the GPIO pins are for. And I'm like, what are they? So, those things that look like a hedgehog, Lucy. They're GPIO pins. Okay, what do I do with it? And so there was a lot of hand-holding with him and various others that got me through those initial stages of, and then when actually the light went on for the ISS, it was like, no, now this opens up so many doors.
Gosh, yeah. I mean, it's so strange, isn't it? How, I mean, I studied mechanical engineering. I was taught Pascal, which, and I think it was, not to be unfair to Pascal. Pascal, in hindsight, isn't especially complex, but I think the projects that we were assigned were just dull. There was nothing like that where you went, oh, that's kind of quite exciting. And also, a lot of the programs were a bit like, make a cookery book that has some recipes and then uses an array, which is just extraordinarily dull because it feels like fatuous to do it in the first place. Whereas I think this is, as I said, Arduino, I'm not in any way expert or anything in it at all. I'm definitely at the dabbler level. But I do remember that moment when in 10 minutes I'd got a light to flash to the frequency that I'd want. There's something quite, sort of goose pimply about that, even for someone
I have the power.
It is. I remember even taking a picture of it and being, this is the moment when I suddenly gave a damn about electronics, as opposed to always just feeling very alienated from it. So I love the fact that, that was a moment where you sort of had this road to Damascus moment. And I think, and this isn't to be overly sort of connections to my time at Lego, but you did mention Mindstorms, which for a lot of people is also a huge connection.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that was one of the projects that we did at Singularity University was Mindstorms. And so that was, my first, because I'd done that project at SU, when Andy showed me Node Red, and it's like, oh, this is like that. I can do that.
Yeah,
so
and I mean, the whole thing like with Scratch as well, where it is now with Mitch Resnick and all that sort of stuff, it's just extraordinary.
Gateway drugs.
And I mean, it is. It is exactly what it is. And I think there's a phrase, I hope I quote it correctly, of low entry point or low floor, high ceiling. But I think they also added wide walls now, as meaning the breadth of ideas. Because at the end of the day, there is actually parity between, you getting a message when the ISS is going, and someone using an API from the Met Office to say, hey, it's going to rain, take the washing in. It's kind of the same protocols happening.
Yeah.
But very, very different utilitarian reasons. And I guess maybe you should say that, maybe if the extent of my imagination is to bring the washing in when it's raining, the fact that you're interested when a satellite's going above maybe says a lot. And I think that almost brings me back nicely to like, how is it, I guess to ask the question directly, how is it that you've managed to have a career as someone with credibility, and yes, you can break out your qualifications and all these sorts of things, but at the same time, you do a lot of bonkers stuff. So, I mean, how do you walk this line of being simultaneously, this...
I was told at university that the world is going to work against me because I'm a woman engineer. And if I can get chartered as soon as possible, then when people say, what do you know? You can go, here's my certificate. That's what I know. The Institute of Mechanical Engineers say I know. And so I did. I got chartered at 25, which was about the youngest you could get chartered. But I always kept it in my mind about becoming a fellow as well. It's like, no, another 10 years experience. And so everything that I have done, although, some of it's been bonkers, but some of it bonkers on the outside. On the inside, there's always that engineering technical edge to it. I remember. I mean,
you've got to be honest. The dinosaur. Sorry, if you were going to go on to one project, but the dinosaur one seems exactly that. But please do the one you were going to first. Sorry, terrible interviewing technique.
I'll just carry on ranting unless you interrupt me. I was talking about the to get a fellow of the emcee. So I had done so many disparate things. Including running a computer consultancy, including I'd written part of the course text for an MSc in environmental health. I'd written a book on rocket science. So I'd done a lot of different things, and they invited me into an interview, and there were about 4 people interview panel, and they said, well, what has the environmental health got to do with engineering? So I said, oh, well, there's HACCP, which was a standard set up by NASA, I think it was, for doing food processing and making sure that the standards were kept in food. And then there was a whole load on pollution. And then there was one chap in the interview panel said, oh, I work in the food industry. Yeah, I know of HACCP. Oh, yeah, no, that's exactly right. Yes, definitely ticks our box. And then there was a chap there from the military. And so when I was talking about satellites and space and rocket science, yep, that ticks my box. And then the computer, so it all just like, I ticked all 4 of their boxes, but only, I didn't do the normal career progression that a lot of people will do. Because the normal career never suited me. Or I fought too many things. But there, the Black Gang Chine Dinosaurs. That was yeah, okay, that one was slightly bonkers. So the story is, okay, I'm going to take you on a little journey. Come down and meet my dog. This is hey, Key.
Hey there.
Oh no, there's no lights on her. Can we see her? No, not really. I'll introduce her later. Put all my cables back in. So that is Enki, my black Labrador. And as I said, I used to live on the Isle of Wight, and I had neighbours who had a black Labrador, her mum. And so I would, when her mum had puppies, I'd go up and say hello to the puppies. And I got Enki, so she's one of the puppies. And I got on with the people who had her, so we'd go for walks every so often. So I obviously got to know the lady up there, but her husband happened to own Blackgang Chine, which is a theme park, and Robin Hill theme park, which is where the festival used to be held. And so he found out about the things I was doing with Raspberry Pi and all the rest of it. So he got these, when he took over the park, I think in 2012, he went and got some animatronic dinosaurs from China. And you could get 10 from China or 1 from the States. So we went to China and got 10. And so the history of Blackgang Chine is in the 70s. It's been running for 180 years, I think, Blackgang Chine. It's an old. It's one of the oldest theme parks, if not the oldest. And in the 70s, they had some fiberglass dinosaurs made. And this was such a rare thing that Blue Peter followed the making of the dinosaurs up in Yorkshire on trucks down the A roads, because the motorways weren't around then, over onto the Isle of Wight. And Blackgang is, so there's a cliff and there's a bit of land and then there's the sea. So my sleeve here is the sea. And this is where Blackgang is. And so they couldn't get the trucks in. So they had to have these helicopters airlifting these fiberglass dinosaurs into the park. And they've still got photos and videos of it. It was all on Blue Peter. So every child in the UK knew about Blackgang Chine. So fast forward 30, 40 years, and these fiberglass dinosaurs are looking a little bit worse for wear, because so many people around the world have got a photo of themselves with these fiberglass dinosaurs that you could climb on as well. They were like climbing frame dinosaurs. So when they replaced them with these robot ones, it's like, great. So they opened it up in the Easter, great fanfare. And then just before the summer holidays, which is when 80% of the park's visitors go there, the main T-Rex, and this T-Rex is bigger than a double-decker bus. I mean, it's full size. You have to climb up a platform to get to it, and then you're on eye to teeth viewing of this thing. And under the platform, they've put some big bass speakers. So when the dinosaur roars, the whole platform shakes. And grown people have screamed up there. Anyway, just before the summer 6, the control system broke of this dinosaur. It's like, what do we do? And it turned out that you could actually put a Raspberry Pi in and the Chinese said, we'll ship you some new ones, some new control panels, but that'll take 6 weeks. So by which time the summer's over, too late.
Yeah.
And they've advertised this T-Rex. So they put in a Raspberry Pi into this dinosaur, and you just got it limping through the summer. After the summer, I was invited in, and I brought in a whole load of geeks. Basically, I put out a call saying, right, who wants to hack some dinosaurs? We can give you pizza and a cake. And I know how to incentivize an engineer. So all these geeks came along and they pulled apart the control systems. I ended up teaching the staff, and Blackgang's a small park, so the staff, one day they might be on car parking and one day they might be gardening. And so they didn't have at the time a specific tech team. They had maintenance, but not a tech team. And so they didn't have anyone who was computer literate. And so I trained all these anyone who had an interest in tech. I trained them how to use Node-RED, which is the drag and drop programming, so they could program their own dinosaurs, and give them the kit so that they could, if anything went wrong, they could just get another £30-40 Pi and put that in. And because it was the same system, all the dinosaurs eventually did die, and they did replace them all. So we were programming that. And so one of the early projects that I'd done with them with a workshop, I wonder if I've got it down here. Oh, I've tidied up, my goodness. I've got this dinosaur that bought it from Maplin for 10 quid. Kids dinosaur. And when you connect the battery up, it nods like this. And so we did this project with these people from Black Gang, that when one of them wanted, when it's dinner time, I want my dinosaur in the kids' bedroom to nod so that they come down. So we managed to program this, connected, put a Raspberry Pi in, connected it up to Twitter, and so you could mine's on #WakeDino, and if you tweet #WakeDino, my dinosaur starts nodding, and so we did that as a workshop, and everyone got their own dinosaurs nodding, and so that was one of the early programs that we wrote. Turns out, last year when I went back, they've actually taken that whole system, which was a fun, let's just do a project, we don't know where it go. And as you were saying earlier, they've twisted it into something that's really useful for them. So they've got current monitoring devices on clamps, the non-invasive ones that clamp around the cables. They've got those connected to some Pis. It might be an ESP826 now, but they've got programmed that so that if the current to the motors on the dinosaurs pull too much or too little compared to what they're expecting, it sends a text message to the maintenance team that says, there's a problem with the dinos, go and sort it out before it breaks. Yeah. So they don't now have to rely on visitors coming down and saying, your dinosaur's not working. They get this message saying, the motor's pulling too much, or it's not pulling anything, it might have seized, go and have a look. And so they took the nodding dinosaur principle, turned it round, and now instead of them tweeting it tweets them or sends them a text message. And so that was one of the great things about the using the fun. It obviously stuck in their minds for 2 years, and then they could just apply it.
Well, isn't that so sort of that feels like such a familiar riff to me of how things have a sort of gestational phase, in that everybody sort of thinks, innovation is sort of you turn the key, but I actually have often used the phrase in talks when I was at Lego or whatever of gradually then suddenly. It's this thing of it sits there being a silly little joke, and then suddenly it becomes the epiphany that's like, hang on a minute, this is the answer, and it's been right under our noses all along. I think, if anything, it's actually just human nature that we don't usually phone up the media and say, it took us 2 years to figure that out, but then we did it in a week, And it's just sort of like, I wish there was actually more stories like that out there. And I guess one of the things, if I could sort of go down that route, is also this thing around, we've often described that, I've said at Lego when I was working there, and I think even back to my time at Dyson, quite often people assume that if you've got a really difficult problem, you should go seek experts. And you most certainly should, as part of a holistic design exploration. I completely agree with that. But I also feel like actually throwing the same brief at people who are from an artistic background or musical background, or maybe even a sort of very divergent field, in many ways I feel that often gives sort of more potential to the application of things. And so I wondered, could you sort of talk a little bit about one of those things where you found yourself in a room where you were, in quotes, the least qualified person, and yet things take a different turn?
Yeah, so it's actually one of the places that I seek out is, who's not like me? Where am I really uncomfortable? My engineering skills are mediocre if you put me in a room full of engineers. If you put me in a room full of non-engineers, my engineering skills are really quite good. So I like putting myself in a room full of non-engineers. And so one of these things I was looking at was, I was actually on a comedy course because, again, I put myself out of the comfort zone. And on that course, during the lunch break, someone had been invited in to talk about her journey, but also she made bespoke dresses. That was her thing. She was in the fashion industry. She made bespoke dresses. And, I've never been much of a frock person, so that really didn't appeal. But apparently she was talking to someone else, and they said to her, "Oh, you need to speak to Lucy." So off I go and find her. Maggie Semple, her name is. And she said, "I want to put electronics in dresses." It's like, hello, yes, let's play. So I went down to her offices in London and took a whole load of things with me. So I took the boots that you said that light up different colours when you tweet them. I take a 3D printed bunny rabbit that I had. That one, it had a SIM card in it. And so my mum could send a text to my nieces and the bunny's heart would light up. And the kids would just have to press the tail and it would send a text message back to my mum saying, "We love you, Nanny," or something like that. Oh. But so Maggie got hold of this and learning all about that and electronic stuff and things. And she said, "What material is this bunny made out of?" I said, "It was 3D printed." "Oh," she said. "Oh, right, forget all the electronics. Off we go downstairs." And she said, "Look, I make these 8-inch tall dresses so that we can take them to shows without having to take one of every type of dress that we make. We take the little ones." She said, "But they're flat. Look at them, they're flat. And every doll that's 8 inches tall isn't human shaped." You imagine Barbie. The neck is far too long for one thing.
Yeah.
So she said, "Can you make me some mannequins, 8-inch tall mannequins?" Like, "Yes, sure I can."
Yeah.
So I went home and Googling female torso for 3D prints is not my best move. That wasn't quite what I was actually after. So, but I ended up getting hold of some free gaming software where you could make your own characters and you just had levers. So you could sliders. So you could say, right, how masculine or feminine do you want this character? How large do you want their chest? How large do you want their waist? What's the nipple height? It went down into
quite specific. Yeah.
It was really specific. So if I go back down to Maggie and say, "Look, here's the software. Look, what shape do you want your woman?" And so she got some actual measurements of somebody, and we put them in. And so I went and 3D printed these things, and now she's got this whole row of these little mannequins. The dresses look absolutely great on them. So that was just one of those projects that I would never have dreamed of pitching to a dressmaker. "Hey, I can make you 3D printed mannequins." She had been looking for 4 or 5 years and had asked various artists to make them, and they were just so time consuming to make that no one had actually made many for her. But on the 3D printer, okay, they took a long time to print, but they just went.
Well, I mean, I always think this is one of the sort of strange things that I don't know about your work, but I find I always get work from not my, to use the LinkedIn terminology, the first tier connections. It's always the second and third.
Yeah.
So there has to be a little bit of like vouching that, it's all right, Jude delivers on time to a high standard, that sort of stuff. Mm-hmm. But actually, of course, the irony is I probably wouldn't get work from you because we're a bit similar unless it was very, very different or you had a bandwidth thing where you just needed more help. And I think, it's not that this discussion is always aimed at students, but I think it's often worth just breaking it down for students that sometimes that's the hard thing about networks. It's not size, it's people who are different to you, but you still have a little bit of something in common. And it's that duality which is quite hard to sort of develop, as you have to go a bit beyond yourself in order to find those people.
Yes. I've recently been contacted by someone who knew me at school because I could do something for their company that they didn't know anyone else who could do. And it's like they'd see me on Twitter, their kids had seen me on TikTok, and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, I know her. I went to school with her. Hey, do you remember me? Can I chat? Can we chat?" And so it's like, be careful of your past because, always be nice to people, always.
Well, it's that phrase of be nice to them on your way up because you'll pass them on the way down, isn't it?
Yes.
And it's so true some days,
And
you just don't know.
My career path has been so, not up. It's been side, bounce, whatever. But one thing I was going to say about our connection is you know how to do some making things that I only periphery know. And so, that kind of connection is, okay, I've been asked to make a thing. I don't quite know how to make that thing, but Jude knows how to make that thing. So either I can pass Jude on or you can help me. And so it's the collaboration aspect that's also great. So it's not just the who do you know who can vouch for you, but who do you know who can give you a hand, and you can give a hand to too.
Well, I think that's always what's so nice in that. Actually, it was a referral for the David Jason show.
Oh, yeah.
in terms of modelling, because someone was just like, I'm honestly too busy, and this is actually a bit better suited to your skill set, in all honesty.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that that's actually one of the best ways, and I've certainly done the equivalent in reverse. So I feel there's almost a bit of a sort of karma that if you're looking at, they're going, you know what, in all honesty, Lucy's going to knock this out the park. I'm going to do an average job and struggle and have a nervous breakdown. Then I actually think it's at the end of the day, your connection will always be really grateful that you teed it up for them.
Yeah.
And I think, again, sort of for students, just to realise that, however you serve them is actually the most important thing, whether it's you or someone else you refer.
Yeah. Yeah. Sue Black got me the job at Robot Wars because she didn't either have the bandwidth or do it. Yeah. So yeah, she passed them on to me. And it was like,
well, I guess that's a perfect segue, because that in some ways fills the question, which I'm dying to ask, of just you've said it yourself, so it's not me taking a pot shot at you, but you're a bit of an odd match for something that had traditionally been the shoes of Jeremy Clarkson, in a very overtly a masculine crash and bash 'em, smash 'em. And you brought a very different dynamic with the rest of the team. So could you sort of say, why did you even say yes, essentially?
If you don't say yes, when do you always say yes to exciting things, fun things, even if you don't. Can you do this, Lucy? Yes. I have no idea how, but of course I'm going to do it. I think it was one of those, it's an opportunity, but and it was pretty last minute. So it was like, can you come and film next week? I was like, yes. And I was absolutely up to my eyes. I ended up doing 21 days straight work, including flying up to Glasgow a couple of times to do this filming. And for the first series, I had huge imposter syndrome, because Robot Wars had come out when I didn't have a TV, so probably when I was a student at university. So I hadn't really watched it. I mean, I'd seen a few of them. I hadn't been, a huge fan. And the other two judges, one was a professor of artificial intelligence and one was a professor of robotics. And Dr. Lucy Rogers, renowned engineer, is how they describe me. Because I didn't have the academic. I'm a visiting professor now, but I wasn't then. So I didn't have that academic, and I didn't have a big company behind me. I was freelance, so you can't say this is Lucy from big company. It's like this is Lucy with but it was the Robot Dinosaurs that got me into that one, and it wasn't. I think it was the second series that we each did a piece of camera. Each of the judges did a piece of camera, and I showed Angela Scanlon, the co-host, how to use different materials. So I had HDPE, so kitchen breadboard, and I had some wood, and I had some aluminium, some mild steel, and some Hardox. So I had all these different bits of material, and we hit them all with a hammer. So me and Angela were hitting these things with a hammer. And then an angle grinder. And the whole production team said, when you were talking to Angela, you were a little bit stiff, in the interview. Oh, hello. I don't quite... As soon as you put an angle grinder in my hand, relaxed, completely in my own world. This is how you use it. This is this. And so I was teaching Angela how to use an angle grinder. And that was the point when all the roboteers in the pits suddenly went, oh, she's one of us. She's a maker. And was completely accepted then. I didn't have that, what are you doing here because you're not a fan and you haven't been involved before and you're not a professor. Why are you here judging? I was there as the maker side compared to the academic side. And that just, that released me to have more fun with it without trying to be anything else.
I guess it's fair to say that, you know, I mean, it's always a little bit awkward for me as a guy asking this question, but I feel it's sort of incumbent not to sort of miss the opportunities. I think if I was a teenage girl watching you, they'd be like, well, what is it I've got to do? Have I got to emulate men's, you know, creativity, their approach in the workshop? Have I got to behave in that sort of mannerisms, or can I find my own voice and be accepted? And I wondered, could you sort of break it down? Because I'm sure you know what I'm getting at, that there's women who it sort of feels like, wow, it's a woman on the outside, but there's like a sort of almost a male persona on the inside, so you think that's why she's been accepted. And then there's people who I would like to think it's become more evolved and more nuanced, and that also as a society we've you know, sort of embraced a broader spectrum of these things, or indeed just stopped caring about it as much as we used to in the past.
I stopped caring, and that's
Good.
when I finally released myself to do what I wanted. So back when I was in industry still, doing the PhD and working on the graduate training scheme, I was trying my best to fit in, to do what I had to do. And basically, I was probably emulating the guys, which didn't go down too well because, you know, a woman with leadership skills is known as bossy. A man with leadership skills is a leader. So, you know, you're never going to win that, trying to be something you're not. And then when I'd finished the computer consultancy, and actually, to be fair, it was the cash that the computer consultancy had given me that had given me the ability to say, I'm going to take the jobs that I want to take. I don't have to take the job. So I know I was really privileged in that respect of being able to, I can say no. I don't have to whistle your tune because you're paying. And so that sort of gave me that freedom of basically not giving a fuck anymore. And so I said, right, okay, this is me. And yet still in the first episode of Robot Wars, I was trying to fit in. So it's still there, it's still ingrained. But the more, you know, fun things that I've done, and the more times I have seen people appreciate me do fun things, the more I can be me. And the more I realise that no matter what you do, someone's going to complain. So you may as well be you, because you're the best you that you're ever going to find. There's no one else quite like you. One of the things I've often said to students is, here's what you've learnt at university. Now, if you learn something else, and maybe a third thing, not many people have got those three things. So you are now unique. And when someone needs those three things, they can come to you. Whereas if you only know this, well, how many thousands of engineers graduate every year? And they have learnt the same thing as you. So one of the things that I learnt was communication skills. And that was one of my other boxes, was learning actually how to communicate. And so now when people need an engineer who can communicate, I'll say, yeah, I can do that. And engineer communicate with fun and invent stuff and make stuff. Yeah, I've got all those boxes. Engineer who can program, that's not really me. So I can do it a little bit. There are far better other engineers out there who can do that.
I mean, it almost feels like sort of being multilingual in some ways, that I sort of have often tried to say that I'm not expert in code at all. I'm actually really quite bad, but I'm able to understand the priorities and the systems and the things that will really massively irritate a coder if you ask them to do. You know, there's almost like certain rules that it's sort of like, do not look a coder in the eye and ask them to just do that, you know, because you realise it'll go horribly wrong. And I think those things are just a little bit sort of hard-won experience. And so I guess the interesting thing, I just wondered, you know, again, to maybe bring it back to the student audience, I remember having a really hard time with how do you get experience when you haven't got experience. And it sort of feels like maybe one of your hacks is just almost like do stuff. And quite simply, like you said to some of those people, they say yes to go work for beer and pizza. And
Yeah.
I've definitely done my beer and pizza days. I've organised beer and pizza days for other day, and frankly, I still show up. You know,
Yeah. One of my early blog posts was a how to make a snowman. And I went out, it was snowing, and I took photos and I did it like a Haynes manual. This is how I made a snowman. And I put it up on my website. Now, no one needed that. It wasn't for anyone's real benefit other than I'm having a laugh and I'm learning how to do something. And it's a similar thing with TikTok. So I'm Royal Academy of Engineers visiting professor, engineering, creativity and communication at Brunel University. So I have to help teach the students creativity, but also communication skills. And one of the things they asked for, and this was last year, was we were getting a lot of our students to present to camera so that we don't have to, so the staff don't have to sit through 1,000 presentations. They can just watch 1,000 5-minute presentations without all the faff that goes on in between. And I thought, I've done a lot of pieces to interviewed, so you're looking off camera if I'm being interviewed. I've done very little talking to camera. And so, right, I've got to learn how to do this. Okay, TikTok is a platform where there is the whole system's there. All I've got to do is press record on my phone. For a month or so, I just did other things. So here's some videos of my dog. Here's some videos of lots of other things, never of me, or my hands maybe. And I finally thought, I'm going to have to speak to camera. So my first TikToks to camera were awful, absolutely awful. But who's going to see them, really? in the great scheme of it, who was going to see it? And so I did some, and then I did some more. And over the course of, and I challenged myself to do 3 a day. So I did one on His Science Explained in Plain English, because I'd written the book on rocket science in plain English. I had a lot of stories that were easy for me to tell, a lot of anecdotes. So I could do those without much problem. There was one on communication skills, because that's what I was meant to be teaching. So I thought I'd better learn those and practice those. And one was just a random one, getting to use the camera, getting to use the effects, what have you. So for a good 2 months, I put out 3 videos a day. And the quality of my work went up and up. And I've nearly got 20,000 followers now on TikTok, which it just feels really weird thing. It's taken me, 10, 12 years to get 27,000 on Twitter and 3 months to get 20,000 on TikTok. It's a weird thing. But again, it was one of those, I have no idea how to do this. Right, deep breath. Shoulders back, chin up, right, go for it. And that's how I approach many things, is just like, I have no idea how to do this. I'm going to look stupid. Deep breath, do it. And you look less stupid as you go on.
Well, and I guess to sort of break it down for anyone who sort of, because I feel I connect a lot with what you're saying, but I think it's actually quite important to sort of underscore the fact that you're saying, you, instead of trying to do everything new where you're in the deep end, you said, well, there's one bit which I can do blindfolded, which is talk about these things. And so that was your brain not having to work hard. And then the bit about getting familiar with the interface, piece to camera, that was where you were sort of sweating and learning, a new skill. And it's interesting that often, it shows how much I've weirdly learnt from Lego without realizing I'd learnt from Lego. But they always talk about this graph of, a combination of, it has to be a little bit challenging, but you have to learn at the same time. And so if you've got these axes, it can't be too much on that side because it's boring, and it can't be too much on that side because you give up. And so you have to go through this little journey. And as you said, that thing of sometimes you don't notice your improvement till you look back over 3 months of 3 a day, and you go, oh yeah, actually I have learned how to get comfortable in this medium. And again, if I'm sure, you might look back in a year's time and go, I got bored of TikTok, found a better thing. It's actually a new platform and it suited me even better.
I mean, for me, it was actually, I wasn't after followers on TikTok. No. I wanted to learn how to talk to camera, and I wanted to get my thoughts out, because I had 1,000 thoughts going around in my head. and nothing was going down onto a computer. I was kept staring at a computer and thinking, no, I should do this. I'm not doing it. Right. I need another way of actually getting that stuff down. And now I can actually put those together, piece them together. And fortunately now, that now they're all online, I can piece them all together and send the students to them without having to re-record. Win-win.
And I guess it's a funny thing to sort of acknowledge as well that I'm kind of hoping this series of interviews isn't sort of eternally tethered like a sort of dog to a stick to COVID. But at the same time, there is something that I feel, even if it's COVID or post-COVID or whatever, there's something about saying you really didn't have to buy all the gear.
Yeah.
You just jumped into this with nothing more than your smartphone.
Yeah.
And so, what advice would you give for sort of essentially being playful with limited resources, but is there sort of a bit of a knack to sort of honing something so that it feels substantial at the end, or is that in some ways missing the point?
It's hard to tell in a lot of that. I mean, one of the things that I realised in my early videos was my audio quality was atrocious. And so I splashed out and I saw some TikTokers were using AirPods. And I thought, great, I'll use those. So splashed out, bought those, because I was getting tangled up in my microphone wires as well. And when I was always doing, I'm quite efficient, so I was doing a TikTok when I was dog walking. I've got to go for a dog walk. I'll do a TikTok while I'm there, because then it's like the phone's in my pocket. I've got this to do. I'll learn how to walk and talk, which is another skill that I wanted to do.
Everyone thinks that's not a skill. It is.
Yeah, that's a skill. And also talking without a script for 30 seconds or however long. So all those things I was trying to do, but the microphone was going tap, 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 tap. So I'll get these earpods. Turns out when I smile with earpods, my jaw is a certain shape and they pop out. So they're of no use to me. So I've either got to straight face, or I have the earpods in at a really weird angle, which then means all the teenagers on TikTok saying, "Hey, boomer, your earpods are in wrong."
What, you've got them pointing up or something? No.
Well, they're pointing that way.
Yeah.
Because they're pointing down, it wasn't picking up my voice clearly.
Sure.
And it's like, right, this has got to stay in. So yeah, I spent money on kit that actually I didn't need to, or I could have done better. But it was, the app was free. I had a smartphone. You can start these things. And just try with what you've got. You don't need to, start where you are. Because if you have to buy this or buy that, you'll always put it off. So, starting where you are and be prepared to fail. For me, that's one of the most important things, is knowing how to fail. And if I can laugh at myself, no one else can then take the piss out of me for it. It's, if I laugh, my earpods are in funny because when I smile they fall out, then who cares? Then everyone else laughs with me. If you laugh at yourself, if you fall over and you get up giggling, other people will giggle. If you fall over and everyone else giggles at you, that's not a nice feeling. So actually learning to laugh at your mistakes, particularly when they're not important mistakes, having a bridge collapse is probably not one of the things you need to giggle about. But if you can giggle at the smaller things when you're learning, then that's just great.
Have you ever gone into, this is a bit of a weird question, but have you ever gone into something deliberately pushing something either to the point of failure, or almost reveling in the failure because you felt it might yield something? And I guess maybe just to give you a minute, if you need it, is that I know sometimes when I'm sort of working through really unusual briefs, that there's a tendency to think, how do I find the correct answer to the question? And I deliberately invert it and work on the opposite. So there's a bit of a sort of springtime to Hitler approach of going, how do I make the worst thing possible? And then actually it helps me articulate better and understand better what the brief is. So without leading you, have you ever done any weird techniques like that?
Probably not on things that I've made for a client, but there's a climbing wall thing called Clip and Climb. It's a franchise that's around the world now. And one of the things that they've got there is called Stairway to Heaven. So it's basically telegraph poles set up equidistance, but going up, say, 50 centimetres as you go up. And so by the time you're on the top one, you're maybe 5 metres high. You're clipped in with a belay system. And you've been using this belay system on every other climb around in the area. And so, you trust the belay system. So climbing up on the first telegraph pole, not a problem. You're 2 foot high. Climbing up to the next one, not a problem. Next one. Halfway round, my legs start jelly. And it's like, why? Your brain knows that it's only another step. You can do it. And if you fall off, that's how you get down anyway. You jump off. So, yeah, and legs go to jelly, I went 3 different times. By the 3rd time, I managed to stand on the top one. But that was pushing myself past failure of my legs are so wobbly, I'm going to fall off. Well, actually, yeah, all I need to do is take that step and leap off. I need to fall off the top one. And so I didn't. I managed to leap but stay. And so that pushing yourself past the point of, but it's knowing that you've got a safety net.
And it's such a weird thing, isn't it? Because I guess you've just been explaining something which is a physical limitation, and of course you sort of think from a sort of caveman or woman perspective. You're like, but of course it's human nature. You've got to survive. But then why is it we still have this need to sort of save face publicly? We think, God, I couldn't possibly say something politically incorrect, because it would just mean the world would end. And invariably, God, we're living in times where you can say whatever you want and seemingly get away without making any references.
Only if you're certain people. I don't think we can get away with it.
No, probably not. But it's just, I think it's probably fair to say the world doesn't end. I do think there's an interesting maybe counterpoint to that I know. One of the bits of advice I had from a very good friend of mine, Brendan Dawes, who I think, like you, does a lot of interesting experiments with sort of the digital and physical side of things. So I'll put a link below and hope that I remember to do that. But I mean, he's always been a big fan of saying control your content, because I think it is one of those things where if one day you slip up and you say something which is misquoted and it snowballs and it's taken out of context, which happens if people have got an axe to grind against you. And then when actually the sensible people look back at like a huge body of years and years and years and go, what are you talking about? Lucy's never been like that, or Jude's never been like that. He's always been on this side of the agenda. That's clearly very unfair. And I think it's an interesting thing that I feel almost for this younger generations, controlling your content will be incredibly important. So I wondered what's your observations with that?
Well, when you're trying to find out who you are, and you do put on various hats, you do try, is this me? No, that one wasn't me. Is this me? No, that isn't me either. And so you put the content out there in those different hats. So that's probably one of the things. There's nothing of me aged 18. there's nothing of me pre-age 30 much on the internet. So I haven't got that bad reputation or whatever from a previous life. So I was fortunate to really begin to find myself and keep my way. But there's also, what your truths are. What your morals are. And which lines you will and won't cross. And if you try and keep them, that's good. I mean, I have, throughout most of the stuff that I've done, tried to keep everything I do PG rated. And I am very aware that I've sworn twice already in this.
I wasn't going to say that.
I know, which has surprised me. So I don't quite know what's going on at the moment. So hopefully you'll bleep those out, because that isn't my normal mode. So you get days when you do things that aren't quite what you'd normally do, but on the whole,
And I think that's it, where after a certain point, you do think people have to take you as a bit of a package. That, you know, the same as sort of any relationship. And it is weird how we hold people to a different level because it's on social media. I guess one of the things, I don't know whether this is something that interests you, and it's just nice to sometimes shoot a question and see where it goes, but I've often, you know, loved this phrase, which I sort of picked up when I was in Japan, of forgive it for being male orientated. But they said there's a side of a man that he, you know, that his workforce and his colleagues will see. There's a side of a man that his family will see, and there's a side of himself. Sorry, there's a side of a man that only he will see. And I kind of feel, for me, that was a weird connection because I sort of picked that up around the time I saw Ready Player One, which I don't know whether you've seen, but for anyone who hasn't seen it, it was one of these sorts of maybe your generation Lawnmower Man of uploading yourself into sort of a digital world. And so I almost wonder sort of, we seem to, a lot of parents seem to have anxieties about what is my child becoming online, which they're not, as if there's somehow a deeper purity or ethic in being in the physical. And yet I can't help feel, but you send your kid to acting class, that is also fraud in that respect as well. And if it means that you enter a digital arena as a sort of second life, or Eve online, or all these things, and you become a completely different person, I sort of in some ways feel, as long as it's not doing any harm, then actually it's quite important for people to explore different facets of themselves, to underscore it again, as long as it's doing no harm.
Yeah.
And I wondered, where do you think you would be if you were back to being, I don't know, 13 now, knowing what you know now?
Probably from 13 to about 20, I was me. I was just very much me. I never tried to fit into the groups at school, and I did what I wanted to do. And what a spade was a spade. What you saw was what you get. It was only when I started going into industry and meeting up with sexism for the first time, because I went to a girls' school, I didn't find sexism at school, and at university there wasn't sexism. So it was only when I was in industry that it hit me like a brick, and I didn't know how to cope with it at all. Then I tried to mould myself and be less. And also, I was giving a lecture maybe 10 years ago still, and I was under the impression that professional meant just the facts. So I was giving a lecture on electronics, foundation to electronics. And I was boring myself silly. I mean, what those poor students thought, I don't know. And I then took myself to public speaking class, Toastmasters International, because I thought, why am I such a boring speaker? This is awful. And I realised I'd taken my complete personality out. I naturally will put humour into stuff. That is how I like to work. And I thought, yeah, I had taken my humour out, and facts on their own can be very dry. It's the anecdotes, it's the people stories, it's the why this applies to me, it's the don't try and put a 3-amp motor connected to your GPIO pins of your Raspberry Pi, even though they are 3-amp pins. It's the current that will blow it. It's a 3-volt motor, 3 point whatever. You know where I am going for that. Yeah, it's the current that's going to blow it up. So I did that. I blew up a Pi because I didn't know that. Or I hadn't thought about it. And it's those people stories that make it more interesting, that you latch onto. And so, the 13 to 18-year-old me was as I am now. And then those wilderness years in between when I was trying to fit in, I didn't.
And it's so complicated to sort of think. I often feel that, I felt very conscious of this as well when recently doing a lecture series to students, of that you realise how much you also post-rationalise. And so it's in our nature sort of to tell stories about things, but of course we edit them so heavily. And so I wonder sort of where that's going to go with sort of the ability for people to have an online presence which is so vivid, because at the end of the day, I certainly know my granddad's, his stories, the fish got bigger and bigger and bigger every time he told the story. And yet, the difference with this generation is it's frozen in time. And so it does get, in some ways, locked down.
Well, it does, but I've told dinosaur stories many times. I think we've just lost my speaker. Let's try and wiggle that. Am I back?
You are back.
Yeah,
I will pause it while we have some technical difficulties. Okay, so it's like technical hiccup there, but we're back, and we were talking about dinosaur stories.
Yeah, and I've told those dinosaur stories multiple times now, and they don't get more elaborate, shall we say, but they do get honed. And the bits that cause a chuckle get put in more often, and the bits where people fall asleep, I take them out. So you still get the storytelling, and it does change in time, but not everyone is going to go back and watch everything that you've ever made, apart from the real fans, and they're great.
And I guess that's it. That it's almost the real fans will be actually wanting the whole package and the warts and all is the irony. Mm-hmm. I think the trolls just don't usually have the dedication to go.
No, but they don't even watch the whole thing, do they?
No, it's usually just a shoot from the hip. So it's one of those funny things. But I guess it's interesting that you. I guess one of the things I wanted to ask you about, if it's not too much of a tangent, but it feels relevant, is the ignoble warts, because they seem to almost be like, I kind of feel like you should be one of the judges on this, because it is that, for anyone who doesn't know the ignoble awards, the point of it is that they usually come across as extremely frivolous or silly or bonkers on the surface, but then the criteria is you have to suddenly think about them over a little bit and go, hang on a minute, there's something in that, there's something a bit special. And so I wonder, maybe this would be a nice closing sort of question, but sort of what would you say our relationship is with sort of using humour, using fun to actually really transform our perception of what innovation processes should be?
I use it for slipping science into the consciousness of the public. If you say science to many people, especially if you say maths, I wasn't good at that at school, wasn't good at that, shut down completely. But if you say, go outside tonight and you can see some satellites, oh, and did you know that they stay up by this, that, and the other? Make it, interesting and relevant to people now, and then you can slip the science in, and they're receptive to it, and then they might want to know more and ask more questions, and actually go deeper and deeper. And it's the same with I made a fartometer. It was meant to be a carbon dioxide monitor, but the sensor that I bought was volatile compounds. And I had a cat at the time. The cat farted. The monitor went off. It went bright red. And I'm blaming the cat, and I'm sticking it. It was the cat. And it's like, okay, I've made this fartometer. Well, that article that I wrote on that, and underlying it was how to get data from the sensor up into the cloud that can come down to a monitoring device so you can monitor something remotely. It was an Internet of Things thing, and at the time it was using IBM software. IBM, I wrote up the article for IBM. The fartometer was on the IBM homepage internationally. First time that fart has appeared on there, first and probably only time that it has appeared on their homepage. But people clicked the link, people read the article, and then people said, oh, that software can do this for my problem. And so it's the gaining the attention with something, fun and frivolous, and a slightly mildly shocking for a big company to be talking about such things. But it's then lead you in.
I think. Oh gosh, I hope that link is still, if not there, but cached or archived, or you saved it, because I feel we have to put a link to that to the bottom. And thank you so much for what I think is, they say you remember the beginning and the end, but I think everyone's going to remember fartometer can get you a noticed at IBM is a hell of a story. So thank you so much, Lucy, Dr. Lucy, I should say.
Professor.
It's Professor. Doesn't stop. What next? But it's been absolute joy as ever talking, and thank you so much.
No problem. It's been great talking with you, Jude. Bye.
See you later. Bye.